come by fast this way. Here we go.
All right, ready.
Get low. Woohoo! I tell you, this is an aggressive flying airplane. I mean, holy smokes. Great sound, nice and smooth. Coming back again. Going up, vertical. Look at it go, I'll just hold it up there.
Oh yeah.
Power off, I'll just let it fall. That's some very good vertical for an EDF. Oh, that's just fantastic. Hey folks, Rich here at RCINFORMER. Before I start the video on assembling this beautiful 1200 millimeter E-FLITE A-10 Warthog, I wanted to let you guys know that sometimes in these videos I'll go into extreme detail on building. So what I'm doing now is below this video, not only do we have affiliate links where you can get the airplane, but we also have a chapter list. I'm putting it in there. So if you guys want to go to specific parts of where to assemble this airplane, I'll have it all in there. So this airplane goes together really fast. It's really simple. You can have it together in probably half hour, and just throw it together. But I did a lot of little things to it. I added some magnets to my Pave penny pod, and I show you exactly how to do that in here. I secured my BEC, did a little change to the battery floor, but it's small stuff. It's nothing that you guys have to do, but I like to do that because it makes it easier for me to transport planes. It works better for my battery system. But just know this plane goes together in no time at all. And the little things I did to kind of improve it the way that I like to fly it is in that chapter list down below. So if you look at the description below this video, I'll have all the chapters laid out: Pave penny pod, battery compartment, wing, tail section, so you guys can go right to those chapters and just watch them. Now, if you want to watch the video all the way through, have at it. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for commenting and subscribing. And this is just an awesome plane. I don't want to talk anymore, so let's get on with the video. Thanks for watching. Hey folks, Rich here at RCINFORMER. Today I have a quick assembly guide of E-FLITE's A-10 Thunderbolt 2 coming from Horizon Hobby. I'll put some cards in the upper right hand corner for our unboxing video and our flight demo video as well. There are links below this video and those videos where you guys can go and check out details on the airplane and purchase it. If you do buy them through our links, that does help us out. So we really do appreciate that, guys. Anyway, we're going to get on to just assembling this thing. Normally I don't do this with these airplanes because they're so easy to assemble, but since this one does have a little bit of gluing, I'm going to kind of just give you a guide as to how I'm going to get this thing together. First step really is just getting the tail together, and you put the horizontal on, then you glue your verticals on, and then you put this sticker tape stuff on to kind of match the camo and cover up the wires, which is real nice. I'm going to do mine in a little bit of a sort of a reverse order, and anytime you have something like this where you're gluing this thing together you can't access this because this whole thing's going to be glued in, then you can't access the servo anymore, or it's harder to get in here without doing a lot of carving and stuff. It's not a bad idea to first test your surface, your servo, and just at least make sure that it's working with just any servo tester. Just make sure it's operating and there's nothing wrong with it. Now you can feel kind of safer anyway to go ahead and glue this whole thing together and not think that you're going to have to take the whole darn thing apart later because you got a bad servo, and then Horizon will send you a servo and everything. But the first thing I'll do after doing that really is I'll remove very carefully, and I already did this so I wouldn't have to fight it too bad, is I'll usually just take this sticker off because we really just don't need that on there anymore. And then the next thing I do with a lot of connections like this, especially the buried ones, is I'll tighten the connection. You guys, some of you guys who have seen my videos in the past, you've seen me do this before, but you just basically tighten the connection, you tighten the metal. So you got your female end here on this side, and you got your male end of the pin, which is on the elevator side. And when you plug that in, sometimes the connection can be sort of loose from the factory, but if you tighten the two of these and you plug that thing in, you're going to get a much nicer fit and a more positive connection, especially with the ones like this that are buried. So what I usually do often from the outside is I'll just push in on this and just tighten it up. But to give you guys a little bit more detail, I'm going to show you how I'll very carefully, and it's tough doing this on the camera here, is I'll very carefully just pry this little plastic piece very carefully without breaking it and get this entire thing out of here to show you a close-up of how and what this thing really looks like. And you can see right here how this flange, and how you can just very carefully with a knife, without sticking yourself in the finger, just very carefully, you want to push on that. And what will happen is when you do that, really careful. Let me see if I get a better angle on this. It's hard doing this through the camera here. But when I push on this part right in there, without poking yourself in the finger, you can see that you tighten this connection right here, this side of it right here. So when you actually stick your pin in there, when your pins go in there, you'll be tightening this entire thing. So when the pin goes in there, it's going to be nice. It's going to be a very nice tight connection. And since this is one that's buried in there, you won't have to mess with it anymore, and you'll have a good connection. Once you have all three of your wires tightened, which you don't have to do this, as you can just slap this together and go if you want. This is just one of those RCINFORMER type things that I've always done to my airplanes to make them secure, and I've really I've had little to no problems with most of my servo connections on most of my planes. So especially gluing it in like this again, it definitely makes you a little more confident that you're going to have a tighter connection, but once again, not really necessary. So now we got to look at gluing this thing on here and see how we're going to get this thing in place. And one of the first things you want to do here is very carefully just pry out the connector, because that's what you're going to connect this thing to. And what I'm going to do at this point is just go ahead and make my connection, and you're going to feel that it's a lot more solid putting it in now that we tighten those things. You can really feel it snap in there. And especially if you do this and it feels loose, then you definitely want to go ahead and tighten it kind of just the way I did. So I'll do a rough, just sort of a test fitting of this thing in here, and we have to do it in such a way where we know that this thing is going to go in there in the correct position. So once I got that thing fitted in there, I'm going to just sort of visually make sure that that thing is going in the slot that it was really intended to. And they left you a little bit of space here to fit that thing in, and this is going to really go on pretty easily. And as I'm looking down here, you want to make sure it goes into that little space right in there, and you can see I got a nice fit here. And then the idea is we're going to glue it, and then from this end I can kind of pull the wire tight and stick the sticker stuff on there. So now that we have it fitting on there nice, we want to make sure it's nice and perpendicular. Some guys like to do this with the wing installed so you can get everything nice and true, because you can see there's a little wiggle room there, but it's not that critical, so you can do it either way you want. But we're going to go ahead and just glue this thing into place, and what I'm going to do is grab my foam tack here, and I'm going to use a brush here, and these acid brushes work well, but really overall just whatever you have is a really good way to go. But you definitely want to be using a brush. It just makes the whole thing just a much better connection. And you can see I'm going to pour some in there. A lot of guys don't use a brush. They just kind of slap this whole thing together, and it ends up being sort of kind of a mess and not really a positive contact. So you can see here by brushing, and I'm doing this on camera, folks, which usually you can do a much better job of this when you're not on camera, and you can actually see what you're doing with it. And I'm kind of looking under the camera as I'm doing this sort of, so if I lose you a little bit, that's what I'm doing, is I'm actually seeing it. So when I do assemble this, I assemble it correctly. So anyway, get a little more in there. I just want to make sure all the surfaces are covered, and it might be a good idea even to glue this ahead of time, before you put the whole thing together like this, or before you actually stick the wire on. I'm seeing here. So once we get that all on there and painted on there, you see we have a nice kind of a surface area to this whole thing. I'm going to go ahead and put this whole thing, I'm going to put some on this side as well. We're going to put some over here, we're going to put some over here, trying to keep the pieces apart and not get too much of the glue anywhere else. And I'm just running it along here, as you can see. And what we're going to do is we're going to brush it and get it nice and smooth kind of all the way around. Really don't need it in that pocket, but I'm going to put some here on the underside of this. And you can see here, again, I'm eyeballing this from the side. I probably could have done a little bit of this before putting the wire on, but either way, it should work out. You just want to keep all those things apart from each other, so you're not getting glue everywhere. Now if you get a little bit running around, like I got some back here, once that dries it'll actually peel right off. So, but now that we have this right kind of where we want it, I'll go ahead and I'll slide this on and get it into position. And then the important part with foam tack generally is to pull it out again. I'll yank it out, and what you do is when you do this, you create these strings, and if you want to, stick it back in again. Pull it back in. This is how foam tack really works well. You want to do this like probably 2 or 3 times very carefully until you create, you can see those little strings there again. I'm going to put it back in one more time. Okay, get it nice and solid. And it's looking good on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this apart one more time. And you see, the more times you do that, you create more of these strings. And then the idea is you want to let it sit for about just about a minute or 2 while it gets tacky, and that's where the name foam tack comes from. Now after about a minute or 2, and I put a little more glue on off camera where I really couldn't see it that well before, now we're going to go ahead and sort of just do our final assembly. Now that this thing is all tacky, it's really sticky, we're going to go ahead and push it on one final time, and now it's going to be on there really solid. At this point, after letting it sit out in the air for just a little bit of time, again a minute or 2, and let it tack up, now that you stick it back on, it's tacked into place, and it's really not going to go anywhere. If you have a little excess, that's okay. You can grab a towel or something and wipe it away. But for me, I just don't like to use CA on this. I know there's foam safe CA that you can use for this. But I've found that it just leaves everything very brittle. So you want to make sure it bottoms out. But this is going to leave you with a tremendous connection all the way around on there. And again, if you feel like you want to wipe some of that away, you can. But now you have just a really overall just solid horizontal or vertical stabilizer on there. And then the next step is really just to feed these wires down there, and then just cover it up with the provided tape. Now the other side I decided to do just in a slightly different order, just to try a couple new ways to doing this. What I did is I put the glue on here first. I went ahead and I did the glue, and you have to work kind of quickly because this does tack up. I glued the inside of this part, and then now the next thing I'm going to do, rather than handling all these glued surfaces together, which will work however, or just whichever way you want, then you can go ahead and just make your connection and then put these two parts together really in the same manner. And these are going together real tight. I did test these on a servo tester just to make sure, again, this side was working, and it was working just fine. And again, we're going to install this really in just a very similar manner. You do have to make sure that this wire right here goes down into that slot right there. That's real important. And then once you have that, this whole thing should go on there really nicely. Again, this is the first time I'm assembling this, so it is going together. I got a little extra glob of glue there, but that's okay. I can pull that away, use a little alcohol wipe to clean that up with, and just make sure that that's going on. So again, the next thing you want to do with this thing is very, very carefully just pull this apart and get those kind of strings going. You can see that. We'll do it again. You refit and then take apart again. Get those strings going, and then refit it again, and then pull it apart again. This is just how foam tack works the best. Then pull it apart one more time and let it just kind of sit there for about 2 minutes. Once again, now that all your strings are set up and they're tacky, you're going to go ahead and put this thing back on, and you can feel that it's tacking in position. I use that time off camera too, just for a few minutes, to move away some of that excess glue, and that's what you can do as well. And at any stage, you can just take alcohol and you can kind of wipe this all off of here with a rag and get as much off as you can. Now, as you're looking at this, you do want to make sure that these things are parallel to each other, and just make sure they're up and down. You could probably even use a 90-degree tool on this if you wanted to, but I think eyeballing it is probably good enough. And you just let that set up, and once again, just get your wires back down in here, and we're ready to apply the tape. One quick note, if you get some foam tack in an area somewhere like this, what you can do to get that off of there is just kind of rub it, and you can see it balls up and then comes right off. So a lot of times blemishes and little bits of foam tack, you can see just by rubbing it before it dries, obviously, it'll come right off, and you can just clean up the surface and just make it look real nice. Now, one more technique I started using some time ago, if I ever have any extra glue like this, you can take just a dry brush, and as this sets up, you can very carefully, you can see, just run it across your edge, And what happens is all of your glue, you can see it balling up. It balls up and comes off. So you end up having sort of a nice clean edge, kind of like I did right back in here. Now, once the glue is all set up, which really happens in just a few minutes, you can let it sit a while if you want and then get to it. You now can tuck away your wires. As you can see under here, I went ahead and put these under as nicely as I could. And you can now apply your stickers right here. And I went ahead and you can see I did one side already so y'all can see what it looks like. You want to line it up right on this edge here and get this edge on here first. And then kind of wrap this around. And then you can very carefully just run this edge along here, and using a sharp hobby knife, you can just kind of cut right around that edge, and then it'll fit nice and uniformly. Try and line these up as best as you can. You can tell it's not a perfect lineup. I couldn't have moved it either way and made any more of a difference, but at least it's pretty darn close how they have it. And then the other sticker that they give you, which is right here, you can see that's to cover up this servo right in here. And it's the same thing. You just peel that away and just get it right on there as best you can. And you can see the difference. I went ahead and did one side so you could see it. One side you see the servo, and the other side you don't. So that colored tape they give you really does make a big difference in hiding this whole thing. And they've just done a stellar job with this. One last technique that I recommend, that I do on my airplanes, is notice that sometimes you have these foam vacuum marks here, and those usually show through the stickers. You notice on this side you don't see them through the stickers. Now the reason for that, and this is a small thing, but if you really like to get your model all cleaned up, what I'll often do is take a hobby knife just like this, and very carefully I will scrape those away, especially when I know that there's a sticker that's going to go over top of them. So very carefully, and you can actually go the other way with the blade if you want. You could even use some sandpaper or something there. But if you clean that away, just very carefully, just follow the contour here of the foam very carefully, you can get those away. You can scrape those off. And then once you put your sticker over that, again, this is a small detail. This is the underside of the stabilizer, so you know, like, who really cares? But anytime you put a sticker on over this, now it's going to be nice and flat like this, and you're not going to see that mark over there. Now, I actually could have done that with these little rivet deals right here. So if you can figure out like kind of where that stuff is going, you can kind of accomplish the same thing with this. Now, this one is slightly different the way this is, but notice also I peel away the outside of the sticker part first. I cut with scissors near it. And that really allows me to peel this off a little bit easier and then get this whole thing on into place. So probably what I might do is I might shave away a few of these rivets right here so those don't stand up underneath the sticker either. You can see how nicely this finished product looks. Again, even getting rid of some of the rivets. And again, this is the underside of the elevator, so who the heck cares? But when you use topside stickers and you do things like that, if you can remove some of the rivets and some of those vacuum points right there under the sticker, it's not going to shine through. So on the top side of the model, that really makes quite a bit of a difference. So a couple techniques here just for getting decals on that makes sense. Just like I showed you, where I usually will take my sticker, I'll cut around it as close as I can when I have stickers like this. And again, rather than pulling the inside off of this thing first, let me see if I can pull this. I usually will get the outside off. Let's see if I can do this off camera. It's harder doing this stuff with the camera, folks, but I'm trying to give you guys sort of the best kind of way to look at this thing. But you see, I take the outside of the sticker off first, and then what I'll do for placement purposes, I'll go ahead and get this thing off of here, and I'll stick it just kind of on the edge. And then with it on the edge, actually I'm going to reposition it kind of down here. I'm trying to get the servo out of the way. And then you can use this to actually place the sticker without fear of sticking the entire thing on there. And again, I'm doing this off camera, which makes it a real pain in the butt to do this, but I'm going to try and show you. This is just to show you how well this can go on there. Let's try this. I'm eyeballing it here. Just get it right into place. Follow the bottom edge of this thing as best as I can. And then once you have that in place, then you can peel the rest of it away. And you can see how the backing of the sticker actually helps you place it without sticking it to everything and peeling paint off and all that. So you can see how nicely that application is. This right here is the end of the servos kind of sticking out. But use that back of your sticker to help you place this thing in position. Now that we've got the elevator completely done, and you can see how nice that whole tape job is, we're ready to attach this thing. Now, I strongly suggest that when you're putting this together, tighten these links like we did before, because once we glue this thing on, we're not going to be able to get back in there without doing some kind of damage or cutting out a hole here or something. So we want to make sure all this stuff works. So it's not a bad idea at this point to not only tighten these connections, and you can see secure them with something. There's so many plastic aftermarket keepers that you can use to secure these. I use 3M blender tape to tape these, just because you never know when you pull from that end if you end up disconnecting one of these, and you're never going to be able to kind of get back there unless you do some severe work. And then once you've got this all connected, go to the front hatch that we see right up here, folks, and remove the cover and pull out your elevator and your rudder connector from the receiver, just one at a time, and run it through a servo tester and make sure that your elevator unit, your entire elevator down here, before gluing into position, make sure it's working, okay? And you have signal from there. What we're doing is testing to make sure that that line between the two of these is working, and that we have control of the elevator and the rudder through all the wiring, and the wiring is good before we glue this into place, because this will be your last chance to actually find a problem with that and make sure that everything's working before you glue all this stuff into place. So now once you have all this secure, just using the same technique, we can shove all those wires down in there, and using of course, again, foam tack. Again, I don't want to use foam safe CA. I think it's too brittle, but guys can use it. It works. This is just my preference. You're going to brush it on all the contact points, brush it on all the contact points here as well. And then we're going to put it down, take it off, put it down, take it off like 2 or 3 times until we get enough strings, and then just kind of let it hang for about a minute or two and then secure it back in place. This is going to be the best technique for getting your rudder, your elevator and your rudder on there securely and making sure that everything works. The last major part of the assembly is really just putting the wing on. You can see here you've got your 3 connections for your aileron, your flaps, and your landing gear, and those 3 connections just literally plug into here, and you've got 4 screws. So just to show it to you, it's probably something you don't really need to see quite so much, but you really just put this thing in place, and with your hands, put one on the top side of the airplane, one on the bottom, just get it in position, and then just sort of push it down into place. You can feel those connections going in, and you can see this stellar fit overall and how these go in there. You just put your 4 screws in. All your connections are already made, folks. No wiring whatsoever. You just screw the 4 of these things into position. You may have to wiggle them a little bit. Now I can feel it biting. Initially it wasn't really biting into the screw, but you just turn it until you feel it bite. It's going to go in several turns, and it's going to get tight on you. Once you feel that thing getting tight, just turn it a few extra, just a little bit more, do it by feel, and that is it, folks. That is your wing secured in position, and it comes off just as easily for transport with these 4 screws if you need to. But the plane is a 1200 millimeter wingspan again, so you can transport it with the wing on or off, but it's just that simple to install. The last part to assembling this A-10 is merely just gluing the Pave penny pod on. This is just a camera pod that they use, I think, for guiding the gun and targeting and stuff like that. You're just going to really, what I usually use is foam tack and a brush. And just very carefully, just like we showed before, brush it on both sides, stick it on, pull it right on out, let the threads form a few times, and then stick it right on, and you'll be good to go. However, often A-10s with Pave penny pods, when you lay them flat, especially with all the transporting I do, I end up pulling or actually bending this Pave penny pod and sort of breaking the thing. Although this airplane is pretty nice, it actually sits flat without the Pave penny pod here touching the ground. As you can see, I'll throw a picture up here. However, you can still bend and break this thing off, and without, again, the amount of transporting that I do, I'm always breaking these things off. So what I'm going to show you guys in this video real fast how to do is how to use rare earth magnets right here. And I'm going to use magnets to secure this thing and make this thing stiffer. So just taking a carbon rod or other like material, I sharpened the end of it, and you can see right here, I put it in this hole, and using my finger as an index because I don't want to go too far and poke it out the bottom. So I'll use my index finger, and I already did this off camera so I don't screw this up. We're going to poke a little hole in here using the pointed end, okay, and then we're going to sight this thing this way so we're going perpendicular, and more importantly in this direction so we're not poking the rod out of here or out of here, kind of like I almost did right here. And very carefully we're going to push this in. Notice I'm still using my index finger here. Now again, I had already done this, so I know it's working pretty good, and I'm going to go in there till really it stops, and again, I think I indexed it there. So now we have some rigidity to this thing. I'll pull this out again, just make sure. I'm going to check my depth right there. Looks like I go all the way into there. Once again, I'll put it back in there. What I'll do is I'll cut this rod off. I'll glue it in here with some foam tack, and now we're going to have a really, really rigid Pave penny pod, and we're not going to bend this thing when we take it off because this is just foam and it's pretty fragile. The carbon rod is very light, so it's going to keep this thing very rigid when we pull it off. Now all we got to do is get the magnets here in place. You can see here I already have the first magnet installed. I already countersunk it. I glued it in with foam tack, and you can see it's flush with the surface, and we want to let that dry because not a lot of air gets to that. So we want to give that foam tack time to dry in there because the magnets are actually strong enough to pull it back out. So we're going to put Scotch tape over that when we're done. But essentially, this is how I did it. Taking a stack of magnets so you have something to hold on to it with. I essentially just put it right where I want it to go. I'm just eyeballing it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm putting a little bit of a sort of an indentation in there so I know where to cut. And then using a really sharp hobby knife, and you have to use a new blade. You can't really use an old blade for this because it's got to be pretty sharp. This is pretty easy to do, folks. It's just foam. It's not hard to cut out, and it doesn't have to be perfect. If anything, cut it small because the magnet will stick in there pretty tight. And you only want to go down as deep as the magnet actually is. So, and then when you're done doing that, you just kind of cut it crossways like this a few times, and you'll start to tear all that stuff out of there just little by little. You can see how easy this is. Foam is about like balsa wood. It's about one of the easiest things to work with. And you can see here, I just am clearing all of this stuff away as best as I can, and just making it kind of deep enough to hold the magnet in place. Now once you have the slot all carved out well, you're going to go ahead and take your magnet and just kind of stick it in there and form fit it and make sure it fits in there okay. I did take some sandpaper so the glue sticks better. Yeah, some sandpaper there, and I actually scuffed the magnet just a bit so the glue actually will kind of maybe stick to it just a little bit better. And then what I'll do is I'll just put one in there. You want to make sure that it's in there the right way, which it's actually not working for me here. We're going to stick it in that hole and just make sure that it's flush mounted in there. In fact, if anything, you want it to be a little countersunk even, because you're going to use some glue in there, and the glue is going to kind of take up the space. So now, just to get this thing glued in place, the easiest way to do it is use your magnet to remove this thing, and then go ahead and take your foam tack, and you don't really need a whole lot. I'm just going to stick some in there, get it all in there. You want it to really get down in there. I'm using the tip of the glue, but the tip of the tube, but you can use anything just to sort of press it all in there. You want it getting into those kind of nooks and crannies and stuff that are in there. And then now that you have it out, all your glue in there, we're going to take this thing and we're going to stick this thing right back in there using this as kind of a handle, and we're going to pull this thing in and out and in and out and in and out so we form those threads just like we talked about, and sort of set those threads up. Hopefully you can see some of them here. There's not going to be a whole lot because it's a small piece. And then you're going to let that kind of sit for a minute or two until it really tacks up. Now once the glue has sufficiently tacked up, we're going to kind of do a final install of this thing, and we're going to move the magnet sideways if we can without tearing this thing up. And that's the way that you can kind of get the magnets apart easy, is just by moving it sideways. And it all comes off. And you want to push this down in there. Air, it's hard for air to get out because it's actually forming a seal with that glue. So if you push it, the glue is probably going to ooze out a little bit, and as it does, you can move your hand across this. And again, just like we did before, as you move your finger like this, the glue all balls up and actually comes off. And again, you want this to be flush mounted, maybe even a little countersunk in there, because when you attach the other side of the magnet, it's going to tend to pull the magnets out of the foam. So, but once the glue dries, it'll hold it all in there. And of course, we're going to have tape on the edge of it. So you can see the glue balling up and coming off, so we don't have any excess. And then the next thing you really want to do is let this sit for a bit and dry, because again, air can't get in there that well. And then once it's dry, we'll go ahead and put tape over it. While we're waiting for the glue to dry, I went ahead and shortened that carbon rod, and I made it so it's actually a little shorter, that we countersink it from the top so it's not sticking out there. Now, you can use some foam tack, contact cement, whatever you want to keep it in there, but I think it's going to be tough enough that we're really not even going to have to do any of that. And then using the fine tip of something like a pair of pliers like this, we can actually put it there and countersink it, and now it's just kind of out of the way. We now have rigidity to this thing, and you can see how nicely that thing fits on there. Now we have a nice rigid Pave penny pod that when we pull this off, we're not going to bend it or break it. Now, once the glue has dried, you want to use the thinnest of Scotch tape. This magic tape usually works really well. Using a hobby knife, you can see I can place it on there easily, which is actually how I apply a lot of stickers sometimes, as we just saw, and we'll see here as I get the other stickers on. You want to go ahead and put that on so it helps keep the magnets in place. Again, you want to do this after the glue has really thoroughly dried in there so the air can get to it and dry it off. Now we're ready to put the other magnets in place. The next step is installing the magnets in the other side, and essentially all you're going to do is take 2 additional magnets and really just kind of throw them on there so you got the polarity right. Now here's where you can really screw up. If you put your magnets in this side with the polarity reversed, when you go to put this on, it's going to repel it, and it's going to do the opposite. It's not going to stay on there. So you'll do this only once, and then you'll have to pull the magnets out and all that, and it'll be kind of a pain, but you can fix it. So anyway, you want to get this thing right the first time, and what I'll do is I'll usually do 1 magnet at a time, if I can get this one off of here. See how much they want to stick? But just doing 1 at a time, you can put, and I already did this, but you can put your magnet on there and then just kind of, don't want to push too hard, but you want to rock this around a little bit, put just a little bit of pressure. And what you're doing by that is you're leaving an impression. You can see the impression here and here that I did with the 2 magnets. Now we know exactly where those magnets are going to go. Using our hobby knife, our foam tack, we're going to go ahead and cut these out again, put the magnets in there, glue them just like we did down here, put a piece of tape over it, and we'll be good to go ahead and put this thing back in place, and we'll be done. You can see here with the magnets installed in this side, once again, let the glue thoroughly dry, okay, before you put the tape on. But you see I got a layer of Scotch tape on there, and you can see how nicely the magnets just grab that thing and hold it in place. Now you can remove this easily without bending it and put it on as many times as you want. And I will usually take this thing, put it in a bag, and I'll store it in the cockpit just when I transport the airplane. So when I get to where I'm going, I'll slap that baby on there, and you can see how nicely these magnets work. Now again, just like I said at the beginning, you can just glue this on. You don't have to worry about it. But if you're worried about tearing this thing off and you want to do the magnet deal, this system works out quite nicely. The very last part of assembly to this airplane is just installing the Ordnance. Now the Ordnance is optional. You can put it on or not put it on. You can kind of do it either way you want. There's advantages and disadvantages to having the Ordnance on, and these things actually fit on very easily. You can see, with the exception of these 2 inboard hard points, you can put them on either side. In other words, this one here has a straight mount, okay? It's flat this way, perpendicular to the pylon, because there is no dihedral section in this part of the wing. This part does have a dihedral to it, and you can tell right here, you notice they labeled, which is nice, left and right, and you can see that this one has an angle to it to match the dihedral. So they only will actually go on one side, except for, again, these 2 inboard ones. And simply, as I zoom in on here, you can see how easy that this thing is to install. You just literally put those right down in place. Just get it so it's straight, and then just push it backwards, and it's locked into place. And that's really it. They stay on real easily, and they come off just as easily by pulling it forward and removing it. And they're real solid in place on there. Let me go ahead and just put that one back on there, slide it back, and let's get the the rest of these things on there with the proper bevel. You can see all the missiles are on this side, and it's really just this simple to install all these things, just one at a time, pop them on and off. And again, there's advantages and disadvantages of these things. The missiles look cool as heck, that's for sure. But you also got to remember, these things do slow the airplane down a bit, which, you know, loses overall top speed. But having the missiles on there also helps you slow the airplane down when you're coming into land. When you have these missiles off the airplane, it's clean, and it's going to be harder to slow this darn thing down. Now, not having the missiles on there makes the airplane faster. It makes it harder to slow down, but it also conserves electricity. It makes your flight time longer without the missiles on there. When you have all these missiles on there, there's more drag, there's more thrust required to fly the airplane. You're using more energy, and that reduces your flight time a bit. So just keep that in mind. We'll be doing flight demos of both of these for you guys. We'll do one with it clean, and we'll do a flight demo with this thing dirty with all the missiles on there. We'll kind of compare the two. So stay tuned for that at the end of the video, and we'll put the links below as well so you guys can see all those videos. Now, the stickers that were included with this thing are really nice quality. However, they just had a little bit too much of a big border, so using some scissors, as you can see here, I went ahead and cut the edge of the border off, okay, and that makes for a really nice just laid in flat sticker. These things are pretty nice, and to apply them, it's real easy. Once you cut that border off, just kind of stick your hobby knife in there, and then you can very carefully just sort of lay this right in that slot. I think with the border that's on there, they're going to kind of stick over the edge too much, I'm not sure, but you can see by taking that border off, that thing fits in there beautifully, and you don't really see any of that edge. You can see here the final installation and how nice this looks if you take that border off of the stickers, and just how good that looks without the edges hanging over. Now, there is this decal sheet I talked about in the unboxing for putting the rest of, you can see the decals we just put on right there that went on beautifully. There are all these nose steps, and this is tedious and it takes some time, but you can apply these all over, and I really suggest using your hobby knife with each one of these just kind of underneath. It lets you place them perfectly in position, but it's real nice that they gave you this really nice guide to use. Here's just a quick look at all the nose step stickers that I put all over this wing, and they actually went on quite nicely. You could see them all the way around, even the tail section. You could see how well they went on, and actually they went on very easily. It only took me really just a few minutes to get these nose steps all over the airplane, and they actually add quite a bit of nice detail to the model. Now, when it comes to setting up your battery compartment area, one of the most critical things you have to be careful of is securing your BEC in place. Remember, your receiver gets all its power from this BEC, and you have a very short wire connecting the BEC over to your main power wires, and then you've got this line that goes down into your receiver, and you have two solder joints. Two here, and you've got another two right there. Those are the solder joints that you have to really protect and keep from moving around too much. If you're moving it around too much and pulling on that board, you'll fatigue those two wires, those solder joints, or you might fatigue these two solder joints, and if you lose one connection, the whole model goes down. You lose control because you no longer have power to your receiver. So it's important. Normally I like to see longer wires here so we're not tugging on these things at all. But it's real important to secure your BEC to make sure that you never have any problems with those solder joints. And notice this wire that back in here, I tucked it in there, and that one is never ever going to move. This one, there's a very short connection, and you want to be careful to secure it in place like this, your BEC, so as you're plugging your battery in and out, you're not tugging on those wires very much. You definitely don't want your BEC floating around and moving, because again, if you wear those joints out, those solder joints, and you fatigue those and you lose one, the whole plane goes down. So isolate your BEC, get it somewhere where it's not moving very much, and as you plug your battery in and out, you know, just don't tug on your BEC very much. Don't tug on those wires too much. Just move them as little as possible, and you'll be sure to have positive control of your plane all the time. Now that the airplane is fully assembled, we just follow the bind procedure. The nice thing is they include a bind plug, which most of us have tons of them, but they have this bind wire off the end, so you don't have to reach in there and do some kind of retina detaching maneuver to get in there. Now you can see my light is already lit up, and I've bound the airplane already, and it's all ready to go. The hatch underneath is extremely nice and pretty convenient, and it works really well. Simply just follow the binding procedures here. I'll go ahead and put that up here so everybody can see it. There's two ways to bind this thing, and I'm not really going to show it on the camera because it just takes a little bit to do. This is with the safe select on, and this is with safe select off. So there's two different ways to do it, and if you follow the instructions, again, it'll guide you all the way through it. And then the CG, it seems to balance really nicely at 55 to 60 roughly, with a 3200 pack in there. And I'm going to go ahead and put, I'll talk more about that when I actually fly the airplane. And then right here, what I did is I went ahead and set up my airplane, neutralized all the controls. This is a very nice setup guide. I didn't use it. I set mine up the way I always do. I neutralized all the controls, set everything up, and then I went and I looked at this, and I realized that this thing actually sets it up almost exactly the way that I set up mine on my DX9. The only difference here is that I used a slightly different flap setting than theirs. I used, and the nice thing is they give you the amount of elevator to flap mixing that you should use, and that's really helpful. But setting up everything with one aileron, one flap for the aircraft type and all that, they already have it all set up to go, and the settings just seem about right. Also, the dual rates, I always use 170 and 125. This does not allow 125. It's almost hard to fly it there. And probably the reason for that is the AS3X system probably overrides that or doesn't allow it for some reason. But that's okay. I haven't used this system yet, and this is going to be the first time using the gyro system in this. But I did go ahead, as we talked about, I set it up with the safe select. Not that I need it, but I thought I would try it out and show it to you all inside as we're out at the field flying this thing. And then also right here, it does show you how to designate a switch for the safe select system, and I went ahead and put that on one of my other switches. And then this shows you how to assign it if you're using a DX6 or a DX6E. So that may be important if you have that radio. And then one other thing I noticed down here that I will try, and we'll talk about this in the flight demo, is in-flight trimming. You notice here it says during your first flight, make all your settings at 3/4 throttle. I'm usually using full throttle when I'm doing that. And then it says wait 3 seconds right here. So it says after adjusting your trim, and you're in level flight basically is what they're saying. Don't mess with your controls for 3 seconds. This lets the receiver learn the correct settings to optimize your AS3X performer. Failure to do so could affect flight performance. I don't know. We'll see how that is. I'm going to mess with this when we're out at the field, and I'll talk about that during the flying. Then it says after landing, adjust the linkages mechanically to account for trim changes, then reset the trim to neutral. Ensure the aircraft will fly straight and level with no sub-trim at all, no trim or sub-trim. So we'll mess with that as we get to the flight video, and I'll talk about that there. Here she is, folks, all ready to go. I found the assembly process of this thing very nice, and as you saw in the video, I did a few extra things to it. Those are things you don't need to do. You can speed it and just get those things together. But a couple things like securing your BEC, Pave penny pod, you know, putting that on with magnets. Those are just things I like to do to the airplane just to kind of, you know, make it a little more secure, a little more easier for me to operate. But everything went together real nice. You can see ailerons, everything's set up, elevator, rudder, everything's set up the way the manual said, and everything's real nice. Now, one thing this model kind of did that no other model's ever done before for me is the ailerons, flaps, the elevator back there, and the rudders were all neutral. I didn't need to pop off a single ball link or adjust a single rod. They were all neutral right where they're supposed to be, even the nose wheel. But we'll see how we get out when we get out there and fly it and talk to you guys a little bit about that. What I'm going to do here real quickly here is just show everybody how nice this landing gear is. That's something I hadn't showed you yet. And let me just flip this around. You can see how nice the nose strut is, all machined aluminum. There's only one E-ring on this airplane on the nose wheel. You see I put a little bit of foam tack on that E-ring to help keep it on there so you don't lose that and lose the wheel. But beautiful compression strut all the way around. Same thing here with the main gear. Let me get that a little closer to the camera so you guys can see how that is. I'm a solo operation here today as usual, but you can see nice compression on that landing gear. So let's go ahead and cycle that for everybody. I'm reaching down, grabbing my radio, showing you guys. Here we go. We'll get that right in the camera. Let me move my camera a little bit and let's cycle that. You can see how nice that is, just beautiful. Right out of the box like this. It's only about the second or third time I've cycled it, and it seems to be right where it ought to be. Everything's set up in neutral. Again, all the ball links are nicely set up. Everything's in a good place, and it's very little work. It's nice, very little work getting this airplane together. So stay tuned, folks. I'm hoping I get the flight demo video. It should be at the end or at the bottom for you guys to see. We'll be doing 2 flight demos on the airplane at least. One without the Ordnance and one with the Ordnance, so we can kind of get an idea of the speed and the drag and so forth that adds. And also I have it set up with the AS3X gyro stabilizer, which I never have any gyros in my planes, but this was already installed, so we're going to go with it as is and talk about that as we fly it. So 100-mile-an-hour airplane, folks. This is going to be really sweet. Also, folks, just click the links below. If you guys are interested in buying the airplane, that really does help us out if you use our links to purchase. We thank you guys for that. We appreciate y'all watching RC Informer. Stay tuned for the flight demos. And as always, folks, we will see you next time.